If you're like a lot of magicians, you dream of putting together a show, something that you can present to an appreciative audience. But the problem is, for most of us, you feel like you don't know where to begin with that process. Here at Erudite Magic, I believe that the answer probably already lies in something that's on your shelf. So in this episode, I'm going to share some of my top 10 books to help you put together an act so that if you're stuck and don't know where to go, by the end of this episode, you should have some direction on where you can go on your shelves to get more information, as well as some highlights that I'm going to share from each book that may help you get started anyway. And towards the end of the episode, I'm going to share what I think is a kind of controversial opinion that I have about forming your own act. Without any further ado, let's get going. For some of my close-up card performers out there, you know who you are, and people maybe who are just getting started, you don't have to look very far from beginner texts to get something that will help you put together an act. At number 10 on my list, I'm talking about The Royal Road to Card Magic. If you go towards the back of this book, just before the platform tricks, you're going to find a section with routines in it. And these routines are a decent way to get you started. The idea behind it is the fundamental concept of everything we're talking about. Whatever you're doing to put together a show needs to be more than just, here's a trick, here's another trick, let me show you something else. There should be some kind of through line or something that creates intrigue to get your participants and spectators to dial in to what you're doing. Can I show you a card trick? Probably isn't your best lead-in, and that's exactly what this text points out. You need to have something that captures the interest of your potential crowd or audience or participants, and then you need to be able to kind of tie things together just a little bit. It doesn't take much, but this book will help you get started, and even though the suggestions for the script to get you there might be outdated, you'll still get the core concept, and you'll be able to string together some tricks back to back to back so that you have a full presentation for your participants. The other benefit to this is that it will teach you every trick in these pages. So if you own this book, you already have a ready-made set of card tricks that you can share with someone. At number 9 on this list, I have Stage by Stage by John Graham. And the reason for this book being on my list is that he gives some absolutely great advice to people who are just starting out, and then he gives you practical examples. What do I mean by this? If you go to the middle of the book, around page 83, the 3 Ps, this is great advice from a real working professional who's telling you how to plan your show, structure your effects to have openers and closers, to vary the texture of your show by using volunteers or not, and perfecting your show, getting out there and doing it. But beyond that specific instruction, the whole book is teaching you how to take what you already know and turn it into a show. And at the end, he's going to give you several shows that he has put together to illustrate what he's trying to do and how you can structure things to fit together into a cohesive whole that we call a show. This book is practical, hands-on, and again, it meets you where you are. If you are a close-up performer, this is geared to you, especially if you're working to present to bigger audiences on a stage or platform of some kind. At number 8 on our list of books that will help you put together a show, I have Handsome Jack, etc. by John Lovick and his alter ego, Handsome Jack. Now, this differs from Stage by Stage in that most of the material found in this book is going to be for the performer who's already doing some stand-up and wants to continue down that path. But like the previous book, it is broken down into beginners, middles, and closers. But not only that, John Lovick, who himself is a professional magician, walks you through some of the things that you need to learn about creating a character or what aspects of your magic should you be working on or focused on. He gives some really hands-on practical advice for scripting, and of course along the way you're learning a lot of great tricks that could go into a stand-up or parlor style show. At number 7 on this list, I have Gene Anderson, The Book. The section that will help you with your show starts in the part-time pro section, which has had a profound impact on the way I approach my magic because you see, I am a part-time pro. Gene makes the assertion that you're not an amateur because you're putting in the work of a professional and you're going to be paid for shows. It may not be your full-time occupation, but you're still going to put the same love and work into it as someone who did it more often. Not only do you get that inspiration, but immediately following, he's going to walk you through an overview of the way he puts together an act, everything from putting together your trick list, picking out the tricks that you want to do that's your A material, How do you frame this show? What are some practical steps? Writing your script, probably one of the most important details in this book that will help you when putting together your own show is tightening the show. And to achieve this end, Gene gives you a very practical tip, one that I've done fairly consistently after reading this book, and that is to audio record your show. Now, why not video, you say? Well, video is great if you can get cameras set up and all that, and that's great for marketing. But if you're trying to improve your show, audio is really a great key. When you watch your show, your eyes override what your ears hear, and you might be missing things like the audience isn't laughing when you wanted them to, or there was a laugh out there about something you didn't know was funny that now you should include in every time you perform this piece. Of course, you're also going to learn a lot of really great tricks, and it's filled with the wisdom of Gene Anderson. I know I've learned a ton from this book and putting together my own shows. At number 6 on this list is something that's a little more advanced. I don't necessarily recommend this for the beginner. I think that once you have a show and you're trying to tighten it down and learn some of the subtle nuances, it's probably more helpful, although there's certainly plenty to benefit from, even if you're a relative newbie to performing shows. I'm talking about Darren Brown's Notes from a Fellow Traveler. This book was written while Darren was on tour in the UK, and as he goes along, he's sharing different thoughts and ideas that are important, adding texture to your show, lights and shadows, or peaks and valleys, whatever you want to call it. He covers things like how to handle participants when they're coming on stage, developing your own character, handling disclaimers, how do you get applause. There's a lot in this, but it definitely feels like you're going to be out of your depth if you're just getting started. But still, this is the book that I've already revisited and will continue to revisit to learn tips from one of the top performers of the modern era. This episode is sponsored by Don's Magic and Books. You've already heard me talk about several books, and Don carries some of these on his website. So if you don't have one of these resources already available to you, then check out his website via the link down in the description below to find one of these books at an absolute bargain. Don offers fast and free shipping if you meet very low thresholds within the United States. And I know you're going to love looking at what books he has on his website and adding them to your library. So I don't know what you're waiting for. Head over to his website, check it out, and start shopping with Don's Magic and Books. At number 5 on my list, I have Richard Osterland's The Professional Mentalist's Field Manual. This is a pretty small book, but it is dense with a lot of wisdom. He gives a lot of advice in this book about picking material, whether you should go out on a limb and choose things that are going to be more difficult to pull off or simple, how to handle it if you're part of a variety show with other entertainers, like how do you get them on your side. He subscribes to the Tarbell methodology, which is to use an odd number of effects, and he walks you through his entire show that he had been doing at the time he wrote this for 35 years. This was one of the main starting points for me. I started with his approach. I believe there are 5 effects. And I followed a similar pattern in some of my early shows, and it stood me quite well. Plenty of other practical things in here about how to make your show play bigger than it really is, movement around the stage, in the audience, how to get standing ovations, and how to get your audience to remember you. Richard also believes in borrowing from other worlds like the film world and behind-the-scenes type DVDs and tapes to say you should be storyboarding your show for maximum effect. That's not going to work for everyone, but if you're able in some way to create the pictures and look at the props that you want to use and arrange things, you'll be able to make a much more memorable show that your audiences will never forget. At number 4 on this list, I have Maximum Entertainment, the book that we all know from Ken Weber. I don't have version 2.0. I recommend that you get the 2.0 version, but because I have this one and the contents are very similar in terms of when it comes to structuring your show, I can speak to this. The entire premise of this book is to make you your own director. Now, of course, if you can afford to have a director or have a friend that's got experience and is willing to serve as your director, that's probably better because you're focused on presenting, they can be focused on coaching and helping you make this into the best show. But if, like most of us, you're pretty much a one-person operation, then this book is going to help you focus on what you should be looking at and looking for in your presentations. Talking about things you should and shouldn't say, how to handle pre-show in terms of getting the lights ready and the sound ready, and you own that stage when you get on there. The core principles of what every line of your show should be doing, should be entertaining or instructing. There has to be a reason for why you're saying what you're saying if you want to trim the fat out. He gives tips on mentalism, on how to be funny. There's a lot in here. It might seem like a lot of his ideas are obvious, but frankly, they're not when you're in the thick of things. So I think it's helpful to read something like this, take some notes, apply what you're reading here, and your show will definitely be better and you'll be able to level up. How appropriate that at number 3 on my list here, I have the Tarbell number 3. So if you just heard me talk about Richard Osterlin, he subscribes to the method that's taught in this book, and especially the first 2 chapters. In those first 2 chapters, the author is walking you through the things that need to go into your act, the structure, the way you need to form it. And he gives you examples of old-time magic masters. Now, a lot of what is written in Tarbell seems like it's older, out of date, but that's actually ripe for us to learn from because those people are long dead and are no longer performing their act. So if we wanted to more or less copy what we see there, we don't run into many problems doing so. I mentioned earlier that I used the Richard Osterlin book to kind of structure some of my early acts, and I immediately went to Tarbell after he referenced it to study what Harlan Tarbell was saying should go into your act. And like any book or any of these ones that I'm talking about, the rules are made to be broken. So once you understand the structure and what they're getting at, and you've tried it for yourself, you can decide whether you agree or disagree and change it from a position of knowledge rather than one of ignorance. So until you know something, follow somebody's advice like Harlan Tarbell's or one of these other books and get started. At number 2 on my list of very helpful books for putting together a show, I have The Approach by Jamie D. Grant. This book's been out of print, but I can tell you that Vanishing Ink will be reprinting this later this year, and this isn't intended to be marketing as much as this book is super helpful if you want to become a walk-around performer. Although my preference is to do stand-up gigs, I have done a lot of walk-around. Everything that I've done in those walk-around gigs, I learned from The Approach. This entire book stemmed from Jamie documenting via a blog about what he was learning as he was attempting to become a full-time walk-around magician, and then coming up with kind of a workbook type of approach. He's going to tell you exactly how to pick your material, how many tricks do you need, how to move from one group to another, how to get applause and excitement for the group to bring everyone together. How do you get people to recognize you as the performer right away and build that rapport? What do you wear? How much do you charge? It's all covered in this book, and it is so practical. But if you are looking to do walk-around magic, there's a reason that this is number 2 on my list. Number 1 on my list, I think, is going to surprise you because it's not actually a book. It is a booklet, it is a downloadable PDF, and it is by Dan Harlan. It's called More Than Meets the Eye, and I purchased this from his website a number of years ago. You can see that my copy is rather worn because I have spent a lot of time working with this document. He advocates for sets of 3, and he goes further to ask for 3 sets of 3 during your show, with great breakdowns about what each trick within the set of 3 and the ultimate set of 9, what it should be accomplishing for your show, and what kind of pieces you should put in there. Something fast, something to display your character and personality to the audience, something that's really going to smack them in the face. Where do you put new items when you want to try them? This will help you figure that out as it has done for me. And he also includes a lot of worksheets in here, examples of performance contracts, having a business card, what do you need to have, your schedule, practicing, rehearsal. It's really not a huge PDF, but it's also not super expensive. And if what you're trying to do is figure out what order to put things in, I have found this super helpful. At the end of the day, it really comes down to just start. My point in coming up with this list wasn't really to rank these. They're not in any particular order. What I'm trying to get you to see is that you probably have one of these resources available to you. And my guess is that you just need a little bit of a push to start putting together that show. And if you take one of these books off of your shelf and allow that author to pour themselves into you, share their advice, just take the advice. If you're just getting started out, take action, start coming up with a list, start doing those steps to put together what you need to do to get out in front of the audience you want to be in front of. Now, my controversial opinion on all of this is that I think early on when you are performing, it's okay to parrot the structure of some other people's acts. Now, I don't believe that it's right to completely rip it off, but I also think that when you're young or just starting out, sometimes you don't know any better than to do what your heroes do. And I think you have to try someone else's voice out before you find and discover your own voice. You need to find someone and then start to kind of mimic that style. All the while, as you go along, you're going to make it your own. You're going to add your own touches, your own voice, the perspective that you have, the stories from your past, and all of that will start to come together. But the only way you can do it is if you start performing for real people and start to make internal notes or writing down what it is that will make this more you. I hope this list was helpful, and I'd love to hear from you down below if it helps you to get started doing your own show. And if you're looking for someone to mentor you in magic, then check out what I have to say about that right here. As always, my friends, I appreciate you watching. And until next time, keep reading.